ideas by going back and forth. So I'll share some words of Torah. Thank you, Sharon. So I'm going to begin with this. One summer evening during a violent thunderstorm, a mother was tucking her small boy into bed. She was about to turn the light off when he asked with a tremor in his voice, "Mommy, will you sleep with me in my bed tonight?" The mother smiled, gave him a reassuring hug. I can't, dear," she said. "I have to sleep in Daddy's bed." A long silence was broken at last by a shaken little voice with the boy saying, "Big sissy." Right? Big sissy. The little boy said, "Big sissy." Right? "Daddy needs you. I need you, Mom." Right? "I need you to sleep in my bed. Daddy needs you." He's scared too. The truth of the matter is, if you have to explain a joke, it usually doesn't go very well, does it? So, I feel like I want to invent the lazy Susan, right? So that I'm just constantly turning. I'll try and turn around and make sure everybody behind feels included as well. So, but it does take us into a conversation I think is very important to have, and that is the role of a parent, right? What is the role of a parent? And oftentimes when I talk to parents, I am a parent 4 times over, think about my role, think about safety. That's one of the top values we have. When a child turns 16, right, what does every child think it's his or her birthright to do? To get a driver's license, of course. What would it mean if safety was our number one priority for a child at 16 with a driver's license, right? You wouldn't get one, first of all, right? If you have a car, right, what are some of the priorities that reflect safety? Well, you wouldn't allow your child, hopefully you don't allow your child to drive with talking on the cell phone, but the truth of the matter is they're going to be tempted, so you wouldn't allow with them to have a cell phone at all, but many of our children do at 16 as they're driving cars. Hopefully they're not using it, but you would take away the cell phone altogether. You know what you would do? You would take the radio out of the car. That's one of the major causes of car crashes is being distracted, and the radio for any 16-year-old is a major distraction. I'd like to see you pick that fight with your 16-year-old in the car of not listening to the radio. What else might you do? Well, you wouldn't get them a little compact car. What would you get them? Get them a full-size sedan, right? Actually, you'd get them a van, minivan. No, actually, you would get them a truck. The truth of the matter is, if you truly valued safety as number one, and you will be a parent of a 16-year-old that's going to drive, you would put them not only in a Humvee, you put them in a tank that goes 10 miles an hour. If that was true, if safety was number one, but the truth of the matter is what? Safety is not our number one value when it comes to raising children. It's not. Right? How would you show that safety is your number one value? If raising children, you would lock them in the room and you would never let them out. That's the only way to be positively certain that they will be 100% safe, and even then they'll probably get into trouble in that room with the locked door somehow in some way, even if it's white and padded. They would find a way, right? But we don't value safety as number one, and I think it's very important to be honest with ourselves as we articulate our values. We think safety is the most important thing, but in fact, right, we want our kids to go out into the world. Obviously not to put them in harm's way, but knowing that they're going out into the world, whether it's out to the sandbox by themselves, or down to the playground by themselves, or off to college by themselves, or out into the world by themselves, we know at some level that safety is not our number one priority, nor should it be. And you look at the last couple weeks' Torah portion, Jacob. Jacob 2 weeks ago comes onto the scene with his mother, Rebecca, pushing him out of his comfort zone. And at first it seems a little bit, cruel that she's pushing him into almost a fight, certainly a confrontation with his father and then with his brother, probably knowing that at some level he's going to be in harm's way. I don't think she ever imagined that Esau was going to try and kill Jacob, but nonetheless she had to know that she was pushing him out of his comfort zone, and yet she does it. The question is why? Why does she does it? Why did she do it? Why does she does it? Why did she do it? Right? Why did she do it? Why? I think it's the same reason as Adam and Eve. Think about Adam and Eve. They made a mistake in the Garden of Eden, a perfect, safe, nurturing place. And what's God's response? God's response is to give them curses. But if you really look at the curses, I don't see these as curses. What does Eve get? From now on, she has to feel pain, physical pain, discomfort, pain in childbearing, in having children. Right? What is Adam's punishment? He has to work the garden, not only the garden, the ground that he stands upon. He's going to have to sweat and really fight for these plants now to come forth, and the produce of his hand not going to come easily. Right? What's God's response? maybe God is a punishing, vindictive God, and maybe that's why God gives them these punishments. I don't believe that. I think there's something corrective or redemptive in these curses. I think they're actually blessings. What's the blessing? That these two are going to have to go out into the world and struggle and be challenged and maybe even suffer as a consequence. Does it have to be a negative? I think in many ways it's a positive. You look at what Rivka did to Jacob. And then what did she do? Why did she do this? There's a great teaching in the Talmud. It says the following. It's in the language of a father, but we could expand it to father and mother. A father, and I would say mother, is obligated to do the following for a son: circumcise him or her. I would say for a daughter, give her a baby naming. To redeem the firstborn. To teach our children Torah. To help them find a spouse. In this day and age, I would stay out of that one. And to teach them a trade. But then they add something interesting. A parent is obligated to teach their children how to swim. It's a very interesting thing to throw in there, and yet you think about it, right? What does it mean to teach your child to swim? I think in their day and age, it meant take them out on a little rowboat and throw them over and let them swim. In our day and age, it means getting into the pool with them and working with them. But there comes a point where you have to let go. You have to let go. And in that moment, of course, you're not going to let them drown, but you have to be willing to let them at least bob up and down a few times on their own. Why do we do that? Because of the words of Wendy Mogul. She wrote an incredible book. Every parent should read it, parent of every age, called Blessing of a Skinned Knee. It's an important idea. It's an important book. She writes the following. So she's talking about Leviticus and the idea of a stumbling block. You're not allowed to put a stumbling block in front of the blind. It's not a literal challenge. It's also figurative. What does she say that means? Keeping too close of an eye on children is a stumbling block. If they don't have the chance to be bad, they can't choose to be good. If they don't have the chance to fail, they can't learn. If they aren't allowed to face scary situations, they'll grow up to be frightened of the simplest challenges. And when horticulturalists want to prepare hothouse plants for replanting outdoors, they subject them to stress to strengthen them, gently and progressively depriving of food and water, exposure to greater extremes of heat and cold than they've been accustomed to. The plants grow stronger root systems and thicker stems. I'm not suggesting you go lock your kids in a hothouse and deprive them of food and water, right? Don't misunderstand this, of course. But it does attest to the idea that we have to challenge our children young so that they learn challenges. And we're facing an unprecedented parenting view in this day and age, right? That has never occurred before in human history. We're trying to remove impediments almost completely, entirely, because as a culture, we value comfort, and we value ease, and we value safety, sometimes to the detriment of growth and struggle. She goes on to talk about in her book how too many parents act as if they're cruise directors, right? Trying to eliminate every bump along the journey, right? She says the following: when we treat our children's lives like we're cruise ship directors who must get them to their destination to adulthood smoothly without their feeling even the slightest bump or wave, we're depriving them. Those bumps are part of God's plans. And you look at Jacob in this week's Torah portion. His mother taught him well. She taught him how to go out into the world and face challenges. What happened in this week's Torah portion? Jacob enters into a wrestling match. Jacob enters into harm's way, but he's learned, right? He's learned how to navigate through challenge. So what does he do in this week's Torah portion? He makes some calculated decisions. He makes sure that his family, that his wives and his children are out of harm's way. And then he goes back and he faces the challenge on his terms alone, and he wrestles through the night. And through that wrestling process, there's a blessing. But here's something interesting. Rabbi David Wolpe writes, it's striking to realize that when he's wrestling this angel, the angel never actually blesses Jacob, never gives a formal bracha. All the text says is, and he blessed him there. But what did he do? What did he say? Rabbi Wolpe goes on to say, this is perhaps itself the blessing, that Jacob has the ability to bless himself through the power of self-creation. He needs no external force to now teach him that. He has learned how to find blessing in his life. He has learned how to face struggles and adversity in no small measure due to his mother's teaching and training. And he has now learned how to find blessings on his own without the need of somebody dumping him into the water, right? And him trying to figure out how to swim on his own. He's learned how to swim. He's learned how to face all kinds of challenges. There's a Hebrew phrase for this. It's called Sa'ar Gidul Banim. It means there is inherent suffering or struggle in raising children. It's the way it has always been. It's the way it always will be. And we have to embrace that, not deny that struggle. Of course, to minimize the suffering so that our children, of course, are not in harm's way, but to create a context that is safe for them to struggle. But the problem is, and I have to end with this because the kids will be coming in a few moments, we're creating a society where we are fearing struggle more and more. We're trying to eliminate it as much as possible. We're obsessed with comfort. We're obsessed with removing the struggles. There's a book called, I think it's called Everybody Wins. It's about what's happening in Little League today. What's happening in Little League? They want to stop keeping score so that nobody feels like a loser. And at the end of the season, everybody gets a trophy. Now, on the one hand, I understand that kind of impetus, that response as a parent. I don't want to see my child feel like they're on the losing team. But at the flip side of that is, what are we teaching them out in the real world where there are winners and there are losers and there's a learned behavior, a learned skill? That skill is, how do you deal with adversity? How do you deal with losses in life, right? This is a sensitive issue, and I can empathize with it, but some of our children have peanut allergies. And some people say we should remove every trace of peanut from every environment that our children will be in. I don't subscribe to that. I think that we're doing our children a disservice by removing all obstacles. We have to create a safe context, and that's an important conversation to have. How do we create a safe context, but at the same time teaching that child with a peanut allergy, or with you name the allergy, or with you name the particular issue, how do we teach them to go out into the real world where not everybody's going to be sensitive to their particular allergy, their particular issue? We need to teach them how to navigate through these challenges. It's interesting, at the end of this week's Torah portion, Jacob finishes his struggle. And what defines Jacob for the rest of his life? A limp. It's a limp, right? That limp he carries with him the rest of his life. From a Jewish perspective, that is a holy limp. What does that limp represent? It represents having faced the battle, having navigated through it, having arrived or emerged victorious, but nonetheless with a limp, because in life there are challenges. Sa'ar Gidal Banim, when we're raising children, when we're raising ourselves, when we're going out into the world, it's inevitable that we're going to face a limp, right? The question is, how do we look at that limp? Do we look at it as something to be eliminated and removed and kept at bay from our children? Or is it something that we encourage them to go out into the world and incur challenges and scars and sometimes limps? Here is a beautiful poem that really summarizes this. It's called I Am a Contradiction. I am a contradiction, a perfect imperfection. On looking in from the outside, I'd think I'd pass inspection. My nails in neat, each hair in place. My clothes, the latest styles. But look a little closer and you can see my trials. The window to my balanced soul is stained from too much smoke. A bird's eye view down at my heart will clearly show it's broke. My best intentions lead to pain and complicated messes. My head is filled with wishes, my decisions second guesses. There was a time I tried to hide each wrinkle, scar, and tear, but I'm learning how to appreciate that I'm more than I appear. Each wrinkle tells a story, the path from there to here. I've earned a little wisdom with every falling tear. My soul will soar in brilliant skies, but then I'll need to rest. The embers of my passion still smolder in my chest. Perhaps I'll let my hair grow wild and skip the manicure. I'll wear my favorite color. They'll say, hey, look at her. My hair, my heart, my clothes, my soul will limp in one direction, no longer contradicting my perfect imperfection. Right? Our job is to protect our children, but our job is also to teach them how to go out into the world, to face challenges, and if need be, to learn how to limp, to embrace that limp, and it's maybe something, not an impediment, but maybe a holy limp. And so with that, our kids will not come limping in, they'll come running in, hopefully,